Well, we did have like 65 kids in here once. We didn't have chairs out; they were on the floor. So that was a little different. Adults, yes. I don't know where to go.
You want the chair? Here. We'll take this one.
All right. Sorry. This one might be up for grabs here on the end.
Okay, we're getting these set up and we'll be ready to go.
All right. That one's on, and then I'm gonna see this one, and we'll be good to go.
That got you quiet. Okay, John, go ahead.
This shows the area that Dick Brennicky lived in up here. Twin Lakes. Twin Lakes on that map is right about where. Let's see. Right about where the Clickla River is one of those lakes just above the T. L-I-K-A-K-I-L-A, river there in Lake Clark Pass. But I mentioned Pilot Point where Mary Alfred was born right there. Every one of these, not this, but like all those big canneries were here. You can see this is all Bering Sea. Bristol Bay is part of the Bering Sea, and then there's Katmai. This is where the bears usually see bears, on a short, low waterfall where fish are jumping. That's usually there at Brooks Camp here on Naknek Lake, and that's where I taught school 50 years ago, right there in Naknek. Peterson's Roadhouse, where the people from Lake Clark got their groceries there, right? Present day Ileana and Nundalton. And you could see that too. Inside, we'll look at Dick Frankie. But before we start, there's Spike Carithers and his wife Hope. They're the retired naval captain and his wife from Kodiak Naval Station, and they introduced Dick Frankie to Twin Lakes because Spike had a stroke out some other man to Twin Lakes. Did you know that Dick Brennicky's time was a little different than everyone else's? I finally found a quote from him, about 10 or 12 really nice letters that Dick wrote to them various years, over about 25 years. And so I found this quote from a letter that he wrote in 1986 to Flo and Doe. And here he says, "Because I have my own time, sun time, God's time, I am 2 hours later than Port Allsworth." So when he mentions the time, remember that. I mean, it's 2 hours difference.
Sir, when he talks about the mission girls, can you explain where they are?
Okay, the mission girls, they were Lawrence Hicks from Michigan and Doris Hagedorn. I'm not sure where Doris came from, but the Midwest someplace. And they, Lawrence just died in January, and Doris is still going strong, lives in Palmer, and she's writing memoirs. They They worked for Arctic Missions, I think it was called, and it was based in Portland, Oregon, and they had missions in villages in northern Canada and Alaska. And they had Florence and Doris. They came to Dundalk sometime in the 60s, and they were there for probably close to 20 years before they moved up to Palmer. And that's when Dick got to know them. They were really close friends of the Allsworths. And so finally, they came up, they visited Dick a couple of times, I think. Yes, sir.
How did you mention Miss Hagedorn? Is that?
Yeah, Hagedorn.
See, I had a school teacher when I was in about 45, and her name was Hagedorn.
Mm-hmm.
She was a great school teacher, real excellent teacher.
Yeah. I know that the Boston Red Sox had a minor league pitcher named Hagedorn. Ohio or something. I think he might have got a cup of coffee, if they say. They love Lawrence and Doris. They love like the Detroit Tigers. They talk baseball with me. I really like that. People that have been around a long time, not necessarily baseball fans, but some are. But anyway, so here's Spike Carruthers and his wife Hope. She had her own cabin too, but not really. That was a guest cabin. They stayed together in this cabin, and they got a recreation. They applied for a recreation law from the Bureau of Land Management. But they never followed through. None of the people that brought Dick Krennicke in there ever filed. Well, they filed initially to get the application and start improving the land and build a cabin, but they didn't take the other steps to patent the land. So when the National Park Service was created, the land went from Bureau of Land Management, federal public land, to another federal agency, the NPS, National Park Service. And so the word was like, if you want your cabin, does that, but we never ran anyone out of a cabin like at around Krennicke's. They, like Dick Krennicke, got a special use permit. But I'll get into that eventually, but I just wanted to, they weren't homesteaders. None of these people were homesteaders. Babe Allsworth was a homesteader, 160 acres improving it, but this was recreational. They also had a category called T&M, trade and manufacturing. And this is the interior of little wood burning stove there. There's another view. Whenever you see that, when you're approaching, traveling sometime in the winter or something, you see that smoke, like your heart feels good, someone's home. Yeah. So if you could smell smoke really long ways off. I'm not talking about forest fire, but in the middle of the winter, if you smell smoke, and you head for that, if you're looking for help. He worked at Kodiak Naval Station in the 50s, and I think Weiser was the first one of those men. There was like Herbert Wright, Dick Weiser, Spike Carruthers that all had these cabins around there, and he came in there. He must have found out about Twin Lakes from guides who lived in Kodiak that operated over there that would fly over. And so he never finished his cabin. This Dick Weiser old things, but not much. But now the Park Service made that into a little shop, and people sleep in it too. 1957 is the first time I've been able to find anyone from Kodiak coming near one of Krennicke's friends to go hunting there. 57. So it wasn't too much, 5 years later, Dick gets there. So there he is looking ahead of Upper Twin Lakes. Some people describe these mountains here It's part of the Alaska Range. It's called the Frenzy of Peaks. It just, you get up high enough in a plane from Tierra del Fuego all the way down to the Aleutians. Here's Babe in his SRJR. That's a plane I told you made 500 trips, in one summer from that Diamond J called Young. And this is when Babe brought Dick in there to start working on the cabin. And this is at the upper part of Lower Twin Lakes. It's about 3.5, 4 miles up to Dick's cabin from the other side, from the beginning of Lower Twin Lakes. So he had to pack. He made several trips to get his tools and grub in there because the ice was still up there in Upper Twin. They couldn't land. And this is the year before 1967 with homemade bark spud. You know, you can peel those trees just like bananas, literally. They're just like bananas to peel at that time of year, but not later on when the sap isn't running. So they peel really nice, and it makes the area smell really nice too. And there, I love this picture showing his, you know, methodical nature, his just perfectionism and everything that God was amazing.
Sir,
Yes, sir.
they, those cabins, were they just, the walls were just the thickness of the logs?
Yes.
How did they keep the bitter cold out?
Not very well. It's all right up to zero, but when you start going below zero, like there was a 2-week period. It was in the late 80s or early 90s. I think it was 87. Big Frankie had 2 weeks where it got as low as 78 below zero. And he exhausted the entire wood supply he had in his woodshed, and he never got the inside temperature above 35 degrees. So, I mean, you know, if he wasn't burning something like hickory or oak, you know, he's burning a lot of times kind of punky white spruce. That's like, you might as well put several flat cardboard boxes together, tie them up, roll them up, and put it in there. It burns like cardboard. So, like down at Lake Clark, we have birch. That's #1 firewood in Alaska. But my friends in Maine, where they have, you know, rock maple and oak and beech and ash, like you folks here do. I mean, they laugh when I say birch is the best firewood, but I qualify it not where you have, you know, wide birch and then the black spruce and the white spruce. That's all for Alaska. That part of Alaska, southeastern, you've got Doug fir and Sitka spruce and those things, but they're not very good firewood, really. But anyway, that's one-winded reason. That's another iconic picture of him looking out his Dutch doors. And I think what I haven't got this from Dick, but I think people believe that he got the idea of the Dutch door from a guy named Frank Bella, who built a cabin in the early 60s across the lake from where Dick's was. One thing is that, you know, a lot of times snow really was accumulating in front of Dick Brennick's, but it wasn't like it was snowing that much. It was just dropping there. What happened was when Twin Lakes freezes, it's 5 or 4 miles, say, down to the end of Lower Twin Lakes. So all the snow that falls on Lower Twin Lakes to the west of the Brennick cabin, that gets blown up the lake. And it takes huge drifts right in front of Brennick's cabin. Yeah, he shoveled a lot. He loved to keep his paths clear. Well, he complained, he said, like when he'd go to Fort Oswald, no one shovels, he said. he is on his skinny bridge. He was a great self-taught photographer, wildlife photographer, nature photographer. And another one of his occupations there was, wildlife. He was a self-taught naturalist. He knew animal behavior. Like he would converse on equal footing with a lot of biologists. Excuse me, because they respected his, knowledge of wildlife behavior. And for instance, when certain kinds of owls or goshawks were nesting, and they usually nested in a big forest just between Upper and Lower Twin, he would go down there. He might go down 30 days in a row to see the progress, and he'd make a homemade ladder, a couple of saplings, and nail runners across, and then he'd climb up 30 feet into the trees so he could look down and photograph. I mean, did things like that, and I can't believe how he was so faithful to that process. Everything he got into, he would just pursue it to the maximum every day, going down like maybe 5 miles.
Yeah, I got a kick out of one of his journals that he got his hat taken off his head.
Yeah.
Either a hawk or an owl.
Yeah. It felt it went right. The talons scratched him on his rib cage, I think. When he took his shirt off, you could see. There, I saw that house yesterday. What struck me was it was smaller in life than when I saw it. When I was there, it was like, wow, I thought that was bigger. And all those 6 children raised there. And I think someone said it was built in the 1870s, this house. 2 doctors apparently lived in it. Not at the same time. And there, I like this picture. 6 children there. And is this Bill Frankie right here, you think, the man with the back to the camera? Oops. I like this one. Looks like he has a spirit model, the spirit of St. Louis, Lindbergh, Lane, Raymond and Richard there. Both were into aviation. And then the horsepower, well, really great.
The guy goes through the snow pretty good in Alaska.
Yeah.
It's on Anchorage, in Anchorage it would because they plow the roads.
Anybody know what year that is? For the cyclone.
My brother.
That might be the bike that he took when he did his tour out to Oregon and then the West Coast. Here he is in a little trailer on in the Blue Mountains at the Wilkinson Ranch. I like this photograph of the 2 Prentice boys there by their mother in 1943. Raymond helped me a tremendous amount in editing journals. know, from a selfish reason, I miss him a great deal from that perspective. But the guy was a wonderful, he was so much like his brother, real gentleman, wonderful guy. And I met him the first time when Dick had his plane crash. I think it was 1976 at the hospital in Anchorage where Dick was recovering. You know, I don't know if it was Sisclum, but one of the Allswood children told me about Dick being hurt. And so she took me over to the hospital. Raymond was there. And here in Corona, Naval Hospital, the latter World War II instructor. I was thinking maybe that was his first use of canoes, but were there many canoes around on the Des Moines River? Yeah. So he might have had his first introduction here in Iowa before he went into service. Canoeing. Possibly starting a cattle ranch on Kodiak Island. That came after I jumped ahead here, but this is when he was at the diesel mechanics school, where he started out as a student, but I mean, they could see he was so much a prodigy with mechanical, anything mechanical, and apparently he helped teach classes before, you know, he graduated, which is not very much in keeping with his abilities. And here he is on Kodiak when he was checking out the feasibility of having a beef cattle ranch there, and he talked to different old timers who had done that, and they told him, you know, you're going to have to kill a lot of brown bear to keep your herd safe, and he didn't want to do that, but he had the skill set then to have, you know, continuous employment on Kodiak as a diesel mechanic and heavy equipment operator. So that was 1950 when he set up shop there. And here he home for 1959 for a reunion anniversary of his parents' 50th anniversary. Here he is with some big cat on Kodiak. And this was one of the things, he talked to me a lot about this. This was a fish boat. I think it's a little bit bigger than the double ender that you saw in that DVD. And it was driven 2 miles inland by the tsunami and the '64 earthquake. And so he was hired, he and another man, to get that back to the salt water. So that's some, you know, that's like some of Kodiak is like that open grassland like the Aleutians are, and then other parts of forest are doing that. Now this is Sam Keith. He was a friend. He worked for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service there on Kodiak, while Dick worked for the Navy, and did also Dick Prenicky not only worked for the naval station, but he worked for private contractors on Kodiak, and he worked for White Alice, which was a forward radar stations. As a result of the Cold War, they put them all over Alaska to keep warning us about, you know, approaching Russian airplanes. Keith was I think he was born in either Massachusetts or New Hampshire, and he graduated from Cornell. And Dick said he was a repressed writer. He always wanted to write. He was a very, very fine writer. He wrote few articles I've seen that went in Alaska Sportsman. But he came up to see Dick in 1970, and he looked at Dick's journal, you know, and he thought, man, there's a book here. So they decided that Sam would edit his journals. Apparently, they didn't have the same understanding because Dick didn't want him to paraphrase. He expected him to use his language, and then he could write endnotes or footnotes, explanation, but Sam embellished it. And but I think, overall, they had a falling out over that, but they got back together. I mean, they exchanged over 500 letters apparently in their friendship. And so the other thing, Sam Keith signed a contract with Bob Hennings, the publisher of Alaska Northwest Publishers, which published in 1973 Prentice's book, One Man's Wilderness. Dick never would sign because he felt Sam Keith's version inspired so many people. I know many people who work for the National Park Service said, I read One Man's Wilderness, I had to go to Alaska, it inspired them. So they were, longtime good friends, and Sam Keith, I think he did a beautiful job. It's different than the way I do it, which is basically because Dick said to me, he said, I want whoever does this to use my language, and then if you'd have to explain things, write a footnote or an endnote. Here's the book. There was ideas about what to do with that area because did I tell you about the land being frozen to entry? Like the Secretary of the Interior froze the land just before Dick Renneke came to file on his cabin like Spike and Dick Weiser did to get that initial. But the BLM told him the land is frozen to entry by the Secretary of the Interior until such time as we deal with the Alaska Native Claims settlement. So Dick said, okay, and he decided, I'm going to still build this cabin, and if they want me to leave, if they burn it, I'm going to leave. But I want to build it because I want to see how good a job I can do. So he came out there. He made an effort to get the proper permit, but it was not available at that time. So anyway, while the Secretary froze the land, they were looking, Fish and Wildlife people and Alaska Park Service people, or from Washington, D.C., they were flying all over Alaska looking for sites that were nationally significant, whether it's like the waterfalls or glaciers or this or that. They found several sites, and one of them was the Lake Clark Pass, Merrill Pass area. He said the overwhelming beauty of the scenic beauty of the area requires, to have, it's worthy of a national park because, say, when you fly through Lake Clark Pass, the first 24 miles heading west, once you leave Cook Inlet and you're in the pass, there's 24 glaciers in 24 miles, and they saw that, like Glenn Allsworth, he'll tell people when they're just about ready to fly out of Anchorage, he'll say, today, the movie is Lake Clark Pass. There's no movie on his little plane, but the sun's out, the clouds are not around, and you'll see this magnificent. So anyway, the Park Service, when they got wind of the planners that were looking all over Alaska, and they saw this book, they then came out to Twin Lakes, and they were blown away by Dick's cabin and everything, and they found out from BLM, that he didn't have title or anything, but they said, this guy's special, and this cabin is, magnificent. Remote cabin, and so that got them to thinking and exposed them to these foothill lakes like Twin Lakes and Turquoise and Talakwa, and 2 lakes are all spectacular lakes. So all together with Lake Clark Pass and Merrill Pass and those foothill lakes and Lake Clark itself, that's why they came up with a plan that eventually in 1980 became Lake Clark National Park and Preserve. Prenicky had a role in helping educate the Park Service planners about the beauties, that area was justified to make it a national park. And here's a picture of, one of his page from his diary. And we have a lady named Jeanette Mills who lives at Talakwana with her husband. They're volunteers. They've been there probably 20 years. If you Google something about Talakwana Lake, you could see her. They've got tremendous pictures, but at any rate, as a volunteer for the Park Service, she transcribed all of Dick's journals. And you know how many journals there are? I mean, there are millions of words. I don't know how many millions of words, but I can tell you how to quantify it by the spiral notebook. So, I mean, Lewis, with all due respect to Lewis and Clark, they wrote a lot. They were like supposed to be the writingest explorers in American history, Well, that's true, but Prenicky wrote much more than they did. I mean, he was there approximately 30 years journalizing, and Lewis and Clark like 28 months. Anyway, the point being, he was a prodigious writer, and then he wrote hundreds, thousands of letters too.
Did he write that in pencil? Did he write that in pencil?
No pen.
Right.
In his outhouse, which is part of his woodshed, there's little bottles of ink, there's just so many of them. He'd store the empty bottles right in there.
John, do you know if he kept journals like that during his ranching years, his Kodiak years?
Raymond Prenicky told me that he journalized before he came to Twin Lakes, but I have never seen him. However, there's a man here who has a journal, from the mid-60s, I think. So he seemed like it's a high probability he kept some, but I don't know that for certain, and I don't know where it is. It wouldn't surprise me. It just seemed like he had to express himself for what his activities were in a given day. So here he is in the annotating calendars. This is 1998 or 78, I guess. No, 94. So this is getting towards the end, but I'm like, my next volume of Dick's journals cover 1992 through 1996. And after 96, what it looks like to me, most of the calendars are just weather related, like direction of the wind, the maximum temperature, and this precipitation. So it's pretty thin soup, but he did do this while he was in 94. He was still writing in his journal. But Jeanette Mills, the lady up at Talakwana, she's gone through all of it. She transcribed the whole thing, all 119 pounds.
Yet another question is there a possibility down the road of releasing the whole collection of the journals unedited?
I think that's highly probable, yeah.
Because I, for one, would like to read them.
Yeah, I think they'll get out. Right now, there's a few, shall we say, less than flattering portraits of living people. The idea is not to hurt anyone's feelings. So, I mean, it's not like there's a whole screen of, terrible things. It just should the people that are alive, they're close friends to Dick Prenicky, and they're better off not seeing that in print. You know how, like, your best friend, sometimes you can have, a judgment that isn't too flattering, and then forgive and forget, So that's what it amounts to. It's not anything with hate speech or anything like that at all. It's just Here's another. And this is towards the latter part, when after he had had a few strokes and, had some problems with his health, didn't have the energy. So there's a view of Hope and Spike there. And she told me they really loved that area when they would come in there. They wouldn't leave any trash whatsoever. When they flew back to Kodiak, they'd take all their tin cans and everything back with them. Kodiak. And I spoke with her, and she donated a few nice photographs of like this one and others, their time together. She lived in Spokane. So this is what Spikes looks like today. We had to put a new sill log on there. And this is copper sheeting, and it's designed to keep the mice and stuff from getting up in there, the moles and the shrews. And they're on little footings, little concrete piers. The original cabin was just the sill logs are right on the ground, right on the gravel pad like Dick's was. And Spike finish off Hope's cabin. There's another picture of it. And that's what it looks like today, with a little solar panel on the roof. And we have, the rangers that stay there. They, the 3 people that come in, you have 1,000 people. They stay in both Spike and this one. Oops, yeah. They're only a few hundred yards from Dick's place, north of it. Here's Dick, Upper Twin, that area above the east of Twin Lakes, with a couple shed horns. And here's Vicky Gill out there in the Bonanza Hills. This is 35 miles. I showed you that cache. Take, we'll get by it. This is right there at her placer mining operation with her husband, and this is where Dick would get his gold. He would go there to help. They had a little John Deere bulldozer, and he would go over to work on that, and they would, let him pan and stuff. And so when we went through all his possessions, he found a little vial, little pill bomb about this big and about that big round that had coarse gold in it, and it's now in our collections in Anchorage. She was a really nice lady. Her husband, they were part of like a circus or something, and she would stand and her husband would throw knives, True love. There's Dick's plane, J3 Cub, that he flew up a few times from Iowa, right around here. And he would come in there in the late winter, early spring, when there was still, or it would be actually late spring, when the ice was still good to land in Twin Lakes. And then when Lake Port Allsworth and Lake Clark opened up, then he would go down, fly down there and go on floats. Just before Twin Lakes went away, the ice went away. And he had it on floats. And that's how I met him, either the first time or I maybe met him at Allsworth in the winter of 75. In June of 76, I was living at a cabin across on the north side of Lake Clark, and the man there, Jay Hammond, he was a good friend. He was a homesteader, good friend of Babe Allsworth, and I hadn't done much. I hadn't had any log experience with anyone that knew anything about it. I had a little, but it was self-taught, and I'm not at all mechanically inclined. So they agreed to have Dick Prenicky stop into Hammond's place where I was a caretaker and teach me and another young guy, how to do the scribing and so forth on because we were supposed to make an 8x16 Fort Allsworth, get his mail, and then come back and spend a couple hours with us, getting us on the right track, and then he'd fly back up to Twin Lakes, and then the next week he'd do it. He did it about 3 times. So that's my first encounter with him.
Did he fly? Did he usually fly back and forth from Iowa?
He did a few years, but not every year. He had a pickup truck too that I know. He made 23 round trips from Anchorage to right here to Branson on Primrose. But when he got the plane, but then in 1976 he had that accident in the plane. There it is, right there. We had to crawl out of there and then crawl up to the road. It was a couple hundred yards, I think, and then way on along the roadside, and someone stopped immediately. The first car went by, and they took him to Copper Center, and then he was, I think, flown into Providence Hospital in Anchorage, and that's where I saw him in the hospital. It didn't look like the Dick Prenicky I remember. It was pretty sad to see because the guy's like always in the mountains and totally vigorous, and there he is, all laid up in the hospital. It's scary. There he is. That's later on. Raymond rebuilt that plane and flew it up, and they had it for about a month there, or maybe longer than a month, but at least a month, and they would fly all over together.
What was the plane accident from? You know what the cause was?
It was, carburetor icing.
Oh, that's right.
It was a low-time pilot, and they think the people that, veteran pilots think he forgot to keep putting that carburetor in and then pulling it out to keep the ice from forming, so the thing got starved for gas and the engine quit. There's some of his wooden ware. He had tremendous friendships with people at Fort Allsworth because he would be asked to come down to work on cats or grade the runway or do any manner of things. And so the ladies there would bake all kinds of goodies for him, and he would then make spoons and different wooden ware for them. And this was a time when he and I were walking down to Lake Clark from Twin Lakes, and this is Laguna Lake. And we came to that, and we couldn't, the outlet is over to the top of the picture. You can't see it, but it's there. This river, Tegic River, flows out of there and flows down to Lake Clark. It's maybe 18 miles down to Lake Clark, but it was too deep to wade across, so we built this raft. And it was late in the day. We had walked from his house starting in the morning, came down there, and so he said, "John, you cook supper. I'm going to go cut some trees and get it ready. So tomorrow morning we'll take off bright and early." Well, I didn't know that to make a good raft you needed dry standing dead spruce trees. I thought, oh, good, it'll be easy to cut those green spruce, but that's too heavy. So Dick set me straight. That's why he told me to cook. I mean, every greenhorn has to learn, right? So the next morning it was blowing really hard, but we just had our sticks to paddle, no real paddles, and the water was coming. The east wind was washing over us, but we got across all right, and then it was about 100 yards probably, and then we pulled it up and then took off, and it rained like cats and dogs coming through and notch with a lot of alder, you just get wet every blade of grass, which the grass can get 338 Magnum shells in my right front pocket, but I didn't realize this, but I learned this the hard way too. By the time we get through the alders, there was a hole in my pocket, no shells. Just the way, anyway. We got down there to Lake Clark and then walked down the beach about 4 miles to Hammond's, and Jay Hammond was there waiting, and then Dick did a few jobs around there for Jay, and then next couple of days later we flew him back up here. Jay Hammond said, "I'll fly you back up to Twin Lakes." He said, "No, I want to stop and get that raft, take it across and then take it apart." And there was a guy had a cabin right on the other side, and we would for this guy, Jay Mueller, his name was. So, I mean, he was so considerate and thoughtful, he didn't want to waste anything. So we did that. We left him there, and then he did that, and then he walked back to his house. He got back to Twin Lakes at his cabin about midnight. But this is in June. I think it was June. So there was plenty of daylight. It shows you how tough he was, hardy, and no gun either. So here's one place that he loved to take his visitors, at Teetering Rock. It's a glacial erratic just sitting there, and you could get it teetering back and forth. I think it goes maybe 26 times before it'll stop if you get it going. But he was really loved that place there.
How did you discover Teetering Rock?
Well, it's a 7/10 of a mile from his cabin, and he covered the whole area. He must have maybe Spike and Hope had seen it first. I don't know, but Dick, or a woman for that matter, who asked as many questions as Dick Frank, he was always curious about everything. So that's when Babe was retired, and so they were retired to Hawaii, but they came back, and I'm not sure if Babe was living in Anchorage then, just coming out for the summer to put up fish, just a can and smoke salmon that his wife wanted to do every summer. There's Babe and Mary, and those are razor clams, which they fly over to Cook Inlet. That's where you get razor clams. They grind them up and make clam cakes and things like that. They're tough, kind of tough, but they're tasty. And the Allsworths used airplanes like Babe had goats, and he was making a lot of ice cream. And he would tell his sons, it's in the middle of the summer, he'd say, go up on this glacier and get some ice. We're going to make ice cream. So they'd fly up with a tea craft and land on the glacier, get the ice and fly it back. Stuff like that. They use the plane for like a car or something. When most of the Allsworth grandsons of Babe and Mary say, like,
Genes are powerful.
what's that?
It's in the blood. The genes are
Yeah,
powerful.
yeah, absolutely. And that Johnny Walatka who brought Babe, his grandson looks just like him, and he's going like, there's a picture. I kept it. It's clearer. There are other versions, but that's me in the bow and Dick in the stern there, and lower twin. 1982. And there's Dick in his canoe. And he had some company, some of these friends he had at Kodiak. They would come visit him, and he would have them in, in Hope and Spike's cabin, and then carry their gear down to the front of his cabin, and then the plane would come in to pick them up. And that's the last one. Are there any questions, comments? This is abbreviated. I'm like talking to you people, but you know him, you knew him, you know, relatives of his. And so,
Can you give us a little background of what you did in your life and how you connected with Richard?
I'll answer that by, everyone here knows who Tom Brokaw was, right? I saw this Tom Brokaw stood up once and, well, he was on Meet the Press one morning or something, and he said, I went to a convention or something, and the moderator, before we went out, there were several people who saw Brokaw and other wheels or whatever you want to call them. And so the guy told Brokaw and the others, he said, in 7 words, you've got to give a biographical sketch. Just 7 words. And I thought, and Tom Brokaw said he thought it over and he could do that. And so I thought it over and I could do that too. So I don't want to talk too much about myself. I will just say this, I lived in the last 50 years in that area. And I told you how I met Dick Kennedy. So I'm just saying, my 6 words, Maine born, Alaska lived, and let's see. I got 2 others. Maine born, Boston educated, and Alaska lived. That's all. Because I went to college at Boston University, so that's all I want to say about myself. But if you have any questions about Dick Kennedy.
John, how long was your longest hike with Dick? And what was your average distance on a hike with Dick? I mean, you were going to go for a hike. How long was it?
You know, day hikes with Dick Kennedy, but the 3 big ones that I can remember would be to go from Terry Gills or from Dick Kennedy's to Terry and Vic Gills in the Bransons. That's 35 miles. Dick told me that was the longest hike. But he did that other times by himself, but he took me along one time. Because the Gills told me at Port Alfred, they said, John, if you'd like to come over, why don't you come over with Dick sometime? So that's one. And then we did that one where we built the raft going, that's, I don't know, I would say that's 35 miles from Twin Lakes also to Hammond's place on the north shore of Lake Clark. And then we did another one to the Sheep Lift, which is a day. You know, we went over there and we saw, it was a wonderful day, sunny day. And like there were 36 sheep and 250 caribou. Like the sheep were here and the caribou were just a few hundred yards away. We were sitting up on a ridge looking down, watching them, you know. The sheep were eating the dirt that mostly used. They use that mineral for lactation. So those would have been the 3 that are memorable. But we did a lot of hiking together, you know, just day hikes and stuff. And when he'd come to Lake Clark, I took him over and showed him the Teacher National Historic Landmark, seen the big forest, seen in the house. They built their houses, log houses, but they were semi-subterranean for insulation. And so we stayed in the forest all day. You could hardly see the mountains. But he liked that too.
Yeah, when you had that 35-mile hike, did you have a pack on you, or was that just your regular clothes on?
No, pack.
How much was your pack?
My pack was probably about 25, 30 pounds.
Just like an old veteran, then you were a 21-mile hike with a full pack.
Kind of. There was no trail, you know. Everything in Lake Clark Lake Clark National Park Reserve, except for right around Fort Ellsworth, there's trails. But out where Dick lived in the Bonanza Hills, no trail, so it's off trail.
Well, I believe that's the longest hike I ever had was 21 miles. Fort Carson, Colorado, in the fall of the year in the snow. Yeah. When you stopped, you didn't want to stop too long, take too many breaks, your feet would get cold as long as you kept them
to stop at the end where you are, if you can. Just- anyway, yeah, but I learned so much from Dick's Renegade. Just all kinds of things. Yes,
How did he finally get the permit for the cabin?
well, the BLM would give him a permit, but they wouldn't run him out either. They knew he was golden there, really. He wasn't trapping, he was not, hunting. He got one sheep in all those years. I don't know, I haven't seen another case where he shot anything. One time he took a bead on a caribou, but he wanted a headshot, and the caribou moved. And he couldn't get the headshot, so he said, I don't want to shoot him in the neck or something, and ruin more meat, so he let it go. So it wouldn't bother him. And then the Park Service, obviously, the worst thing the Park Service could have done when you start a new park like that would be to move someone like Dick Reneke off the land. That was suicidal. That would have been, shooting yourself in the foot. So what they did, they hired him in 1974, even before it was a park, to take movies. They supplied the film and also still slides, and he took natural history photos. And so once the park came in there, then they gave him a public use, I forget the name, special use permit, and he had that. But he was such an icon after 73, everyone knew Dick Reneke, his reputation was growing, they didn't want to disturb him. And he was a volunteer in the park. And the only clothing he took down to Lower 48 to California when he left was his Park Service volunteer hat and vest. Yeah.
I remember in his earlier journals that he had a really bad time with hunters that did not completely debone or take all the meat off kill. He would end up with some of that, but it just bothered him to no end. Around here we would call it wanton waste.
Yeah. He told me, he said, there's three things, like, you gotta make a good shot, a good butcher job, and get all the meat out. That's his precept. And that's what he believed in. Yes.
What year did Dick pass?
2003, I think it was.
That's right.
Yeah, it was in Easter morning. Yes, sir.
There's called Friends of Big Country, do that restoration of the roof and all that stuff. The website talked about buying property. How much is still happening? I know that there was like a kind of lodge thing across from Dick's place. Is there others that still have property rights out there?
There's a couple of private parcels near Dick Reneke's.
They wanted to try to buy that stuff out and return it to the park.
Dick Hacker could speak about that.
Our friends at Dick Reneke in Alaska is trying to purchase that lot now for $100,000.
Yeah.
And then we'll donate it back to the park.
I saw something about
Any idea what happened to his pickup?
No.
Camper on it? I finally saw a picture of it, because when he talked about going north, he had a truck and he's a camper. I thought it was a tow behind, but it was an actual pickup.
I don't know what happened to it, but someone might know.
Question over here.
Yes.
Can you tell me more about what happened to the rest of the pictures that he would take the National Park Service? He always told us that they would pick out the best and then they would send him back the rest of them, but sometimes he never got them. But one time we were there and he said, I don't know about National Park Service. He said, some of those pictures I took were absolutely priceless. And he said, then one of them, they thought that wasn't what they wanted. So he said he was disappointed. One of them had to do with a bear with 3 cubs. Sal with 3 cubs, and he kept photographing her coming out of his cave, out of the den and things. And I often wondered what happened to all the rest of the pictures, or where does the National Park Service then keep theirs?
What my understanding was that the Park Service gave him copies of every picture he took for the Park Service, and all of the pictures are curated in our archive in Anchorage, and anyone can walk off the street or make an appointment and go see them. They're right there. And I don't think we threw anything that he took out, I'm pretty sure. So there's over 1,000 pictures that he took that are right there in Anchorage. And like Bree and
There should have been more than that, because he took reams and reams of pictures.
Yeah.
Not, well, stills, but also of the movies.
yeah, well,
He had lots of movies.
movies, some of them are in the Harper's Ferry Center. It's a Park Service interpretive place in West Virginia, and they stockpile them, like archive them there. So we don't have all his movies, but our curator was supposed to be talking to the people in Harper's Ferry and getting a list or description of all of them. And that was ongoing this spring. But I know that, as far as I know, every picture that he took, they made duplicates and stuff. So there might be duplicates that were thrown out, but the original ones, it's at least 1,000.
When are you gonna release the next part of the journal? Do you have any idea?
That's up to Bree.
What? When are we releasing the 4th journal?
So, on Richard's 104th birthday, which would be May of 2020.
I'll be dead by then.
You think? Nah. Something to look forward to. No, John, yeah, it would be the last one. John's finishing up the final stuff, and we'll start working on the manuscript this fall and go through the process. Takes a few months to get it published, so. So looks like May 2020 will be here before I want it to be.
Can I make a couple announcements?